School Board to order. It is June 6th, 2022 in the Thompson Community Room at the middle school. We'd like to recognize all those in the audience this evening. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Okay. Any public communication tonight? Does the board wish to declare any conflicts of interest for the agenda tonight? Okay, moving on. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Aaron? Second by Dan. Any discussion or anything you'd like pulled from the agenda? Consent agenda? Okay. If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on to the regular meeting. We have no recognition tonight. Any correspondence? No correspondence. Board education. We have education competency board vacancy. Dr. Leck.
Yeah, you have, I've provided Board Memo 84, which is a kind of rebranding of a previous board memo that I provided to the board when you were looking at filling a board vacancy. And I wanted to, with elections coming up, I wanted to give that little brief primer again, just so you understand what policy states as it relates to board vacancies in the event that there was a board vacancy. As after the election, I just want the board to be prepared about the options and what that board vacancy, filling that board vacancy would look like. So I'll be very brief here, but walking through the memo, this relates to board policy BBC and then the corresponding board regulation, so BBC-BR. That provides 3 different options for filing a board vacancy. The first is utilizing a selection process as outlined in policy, and that specifically is found in the board regulation, so BBC-BR. And that is typically the process that the board has used in filling board vacancies. You still have 3 options, but traditionally that's been the option that the board has opted historically. The second is appointment of an individual with a simple majority, a vote of the board, and 3 would be a special election. So again, if you opt to fill that vacancy through an appointment, that's really a pretty straightforward process. You simply make a motion and you vote, and it's a majority appointment. And if that is the case, then that candidate is appointed through the remainder of the term. These are 4-year terms, so that would be a remainder of that term if that is the option the board selects. If you go through the option for a special election, you would need to do that and direct the business manager to hold a special election. Of course, that has costs associated with it. At least in my limited knowledge on this, historically in Jamestown, that's never been, that I know of, the option that's been selected, I think for obvious reasons of cost. And then the selection process, as I said, is the most commonly used appointment process. And you can look through the selection process. It really just depends on how many individuals apply for that selection or to be considered. And again, that is BBC-BR. So your first step, you'd need to make official notice of the school district, the vacancy, and how you're going to make that selection. And that's outlined in the board regulation. You need to determine the length of that application period, but it has to be by policy between 2 to 4 weeks. I think for obvious reasons, you want to make sure that the individuals across the community have a firm understanding of how long they'll have to apply and what that process will be like. If you have more than 3 finalists, you need to narrow that down. So you narrow that down by roll call vote. You could also establish a committee that would do that for you. But really from there, you select those finalists. After you have 3, you select from that list of finalists. If any candidate has simple majority, that candidate fills the remainder of the term. If no candidate receives a simple majority, the finalist having the fewest votes is dropped, and then you vote on those remaining 2 candidates. So if you have a selection without any finalists, in the event there are no candidates to consider, the board creates a committee to identify a candidate or candidates for the full board to consider, and that would have to happen at the next regular meeting or a special meeting directly for that purpose. So that is my brief overview of policy BBC-BR, or BBC and BBC-BR. If you have questions about this process, I'd be happy to answer. Might lean on Sally and her expertise as well.
Does the board have any questions regarding that? Jason?
I do have a question on the potential for a write-in. I'm not up with the latest protocol on that. I mean, if we would get someone to write in 2 names, is there a certain percentage that's required? Are we? And I don't mean to put you on the spot here. If we don't know, we don't know.
Be a majority.
If they have 2 votes, that would,
If that's majority.
if that's majority, then they can choose to, they write their names in, and there's 5 names, I'm just making something up, and there's 3 of the same name, then the county, we have a joint powers, and they're running our election, so they will certify our election and let us know, but they are going to lean on us, so if they have write-in for us to contact, because that person could say, nah, I'm not interested. So that's the process for that.
Jason? That was the process which Greg Allen got reappointed to the board. It was, so,
Right, for his last term.
for his last term, yep. Any other questions? Okay.
See, every once in a while, I can be quick on board education.
Good. Did a very good job on that.
Very often.
Okay, moving on to reports. SRO report tonight.
That is just a written report,
Report, that's it,
Officer. Renfro is not, wouldn't be here to present, just
okay.
the written.
Okay, just read that, and if you have any questions, and we'll, maybe in the fall, we can have, have them come visit with us. That'd be good. Or, health insurance report. Mr. Tweeten, would you please give us a brief report?
I can do that. At our May meeting, we took a look at the actuals and the projected costs for the health insurance plan. You'll note that last year there were some pretty significant changes moving to the high deductible plan and the health saving account process. So the committee was able to look at the data and see it actually had its intended effect. The cost per person, per member has dropped significantly, both for the district and for the people involved. So based on the data, the committee approved the plan going forward with no changes. So next year, no increase, no change to the plan. And part of the data we looked at to kind of justify that was last year we didn't have any large claims, which is kind of an outlier. Typically there's, I believe they said 6 to 7 large claims over 50,000 per year. And the year before that there were 10, so that helped the costs pretty well. Looking at our balance, we ended up with about $1.4 million as of the last balance of for the health insurance fund. Looking at what the expenses would likely be over the next few months, it was a good idea that we put in the $250,000 because that with those expenses over the next few months, we would have been hitting the bottom threshold. We would have been hitting the floor where unexpected costs would have come in, and both the district and to the patrons. So again, it's a good year to test out. We have some good data. We had some fortunate events that helped us, and Mr. Heinert will be taking over that committee. So I'd like to thank Mr. Hardy for leading that over the last year.
And a couple things we're going to be continuing to watch is as deductibles are going to be met, there's going to be more costs to the plan, as well as over the next few months, there's not revenue. So there's some things we're going to keep an eye on, but thanks, Dan. That was a good report, and we hope we continue to see the trends that we're currently seeing halfway through the year. Anything else to add, Sally, on that, or Rob, would you like to?
No, I thought did a great job outlining. Just wanted to comment with the committee. We have just a little bit of turnover on that committee. You referenced Mr. Hardy. Mrs. Mickelson will be coming back to the committee. She's been absent a little bit on maternity leave. Mrs. Tomlin-Rohr is leaving the Health Insurance Fund and is being replaced. I need to remember Brenda Jensen, I think, is going to replace one of the positions, whether that's the proxy, I'm not sure, or the voting member. But a little bit of changeover in that group, but I continue to be really amazed by the work of the group, very knowledgeable in health insurance, and they've done really a nice job in managing the fund over time and making plan design changes that make sense. So happy to have that group working pretty hard.
Any questions from the board? Jason?
So you said the expected outcome, we've seen it as far as lower per member expenditure, right? Okay. My only other question is, did we see a significant drop in, did we see people leaving the plan because of those changes, or was it insignificant?
There was some, but it was fairly minor. I wouldn't say it was significant to the plan. I mean, we see ebbs and flows of membership every year. Saw a little decrease, I'm sure, as people decide to take their spouse's plan in another organization or something like that, but nothing significant that I could recall.
I think it was a reduction of 5, but that, yeah, if I remember right.
By plan, maybe 10 users.
Yeah,
Something like 10 sticks in my head.
I shouldn't even say anything because I should look at the numbers, but.
So it was well within what Hayes was kind of saying would happen? Because they have those kinds of projections, I would assume.
Yeah. From a budgetary standpoint, it's significantly better than what was expected in terms of expenditures, but as Mr. Tweeten had discussed, that was somewhat of an outlier year because we didn't have high-cost claims. We had 0, and I don't believe that that's happened in any time that I've been here to have 0, but that's a pretty fortuitous time to be at 0 when we were so far down in terms of our ending fund balance, so I think there was a pretty fortunate time to have an outlier year to the positive. And I think a wise contribution of the board to put in that additional $250,000.
And we're only halfway through the year, though. It looks good so far. Gail, you had, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, yeah, Gail?
Thank you. If we could just look at what those expenses will do to that staff as we get ready to go into negotiations in the spring, and also a legislative session to see what the staff feels some of those impacts of those changes are, would be also helpful for us to hear.
There was,
As we move through
Yes.
and get into that next.
Gail, there was some discussion at the committee meeting about the support staff, and it is certainly having a no increase this year is going to be helpful, particularly to our support staff. So there was some discussion on that as well, so good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, yeah, we did have good discussion about that, and who we heard from the most was support staff that really saw a nice increase in terms of wage, but saw that evaporate fairly quickly with the rising benefit costs. So it's nice to be able to provide an increase in wage that translates to an increase in wage. Take home.
Any other questions? Dan, anything to add yet? Thank you very much for the report. I appreciate that. And and for the committee's work. At times, it's probably not an easy committee to be on, and so appreciate everyone's work on it. And so thank you, Dan, for serving on that as well. Moving on to, where are we on? Superintendent's report. Dr. Leck.
Thank you. Providing my regular report on kindergarten enrollment. We are at 107 as of the end of this month. We have an additional 3 that are waiting. I think some of those have now filled. I think we're around 109 as of today. Not a number that we'd like to see those numbers continue to increase, but that increase has slowed down a bit. When we look at staffing, it really becomes challenging when they are, as I've noted, the boundary numbers are on the low side of normal. In 2 sections in Gustner and Lincoln, both at in the 32 range or an average of 32. But we see numbers pretty spread out at Louis L'Amour with 11, Washington with 12. Roosevelt, I've mentioned this before to the board, always seems to be a challenging projection because we seem to get late registrants from that boundary area every year. But currently they're at, it's 22 now. But because of the way they're spread out, I feel like we need to post those positions, which we've done externally and internally. Those are really quite low numbers for us. But at that level, unless we're shifting around a large number of families and students, it looks like we're going to be moving forward with those 8 sections. That's what it appears right now. I'll just pause for questions if there are any. Okay. The long-range planning report is what I did. We didn't have a significant amount or really any public communication. So I took the board discussion and my own considerations that I reported, and I created that and included them for the final report. That is what should be approved at this meeting. And then once that is finalized and board approved, then we would post that and make it hard copies available of the final planning report for those that are so interested in that long-range planning report. One of the more exciting things that we've worked on in the last couple of years relates to, at least exciting to me, and I think identifies a real problem of practice, was parental leave. As a part of negotiations, and I know I'm restating something that the board is fully aware of, but as a part of negotiations, the leave task force was established in negotiations. The teachers brought up a concern about maternity leave. The board brought up the desire to have a conversation related to leaves. And so through that negotiations process, it was determined, let's have a task force that reviews leaves. And through a part of that conversation, it wasn't intended to recreate the policy or revise policy. It was more along the lines of, let's have a conversation about what should exist, what could exist, and what process might need to take place for changes if they need to happen. What would need to be in place? And this task force made up a central office, teachers, school board, reviewed those practices, existing leaves. We looked at the last 5 years in terms of maternity as the term to look at, and we saw a few interesting things as we looked at that. During that span of 5 years, we had 19 different individuals requesting maternity leave that encapsulated, from a sick leave standpoint, 472 days, but that also equated to 258 unpaid days, which means about 35% of that leave for maternity leave was unpaid. The concern that we had with that much unpaid time was that these are generally the least experienced and thus the lowest paid staff that were taking these 35% of time without pay. And they were the ones that likely could least afford to do so because they're going to be the lower paid. But through that conversation, we came to focus on an opportunity to have 6 weeks paid when going on maternity leave for even the least experienced staff members. Now, when those had, of course, we have some that have banked sick leave available, but what we were seeing is that for the most part, on an average 4 per year, maternity leave requests per year. But again, a large percentage of that ended up being unpaid time. So we did look through existing policies also on adoption and paternity leave and how we could create policy that was a little bit more efficient. Rather than going for multiple policies, could we combine those into one policy? And could that be efficiently and equitably structured? As such, we determined to suggest to the board one policy. We're calling it parental leaves as opposed to different policies in these leaves. I was hoping to have it available for you to review and for a first reading today, but that is still at legal review. So we got some feedback from them, and we need to have a further conversation about some of the feedback that the attorney provided us. But in any case, we would like to have that available by June 20th and give that to you as, obviously in time for you to fully review it. but then have a greater conversation at a first reading, and then hopefully a second reading in our annual meeting in July, and that would then allow that to start for the 22-23 school year. And I just want to give recognition to Cody Mickelson, Amber Ramlow, Sally Ost, Heidi Larson. I think is a well-operating task force that looked at a lot of different perspectives, had respectful and really important dialogue and problem solving on this issue. And with that, I will stand for questions if there are any related to parental leaves or how we got to this point.
Board have any questions? Aaron, go ahead.
I'd just like to say, I'd fully support making that change. I think that's just it's a win-win when everybody wins. So I think it's the right approach to that item, so.
Thank you, Aaron. And I'll look forward to hearing some of those new suggestions as well, but I will say that there was a lot of discussion and a lot of scenario, like, what if this, just to make sure that nobody was left out in the process, because there were very thoughtful discussion, I would say. So, anything else? Okay, continue.
So moving on to my report, the school resource officer, we talked about this at the long-term planning. Right after that, or right around the same time that we were providing that report, we got our initial allocations for Title IV. Title IV supports our school resource officer, the allocation we pay for the school resource officer, and we're seeing a slight increase in that. Beyond that, we're seeing a change in Title IV. In the past, it's probably my favorite of the federal programs, just because it is pretty wide open. It's pretty well-rounded in terms of how you can use those dollars. My criticism of Title IV was that when you had above a certain allocation, I think it was 30,000, right? 30,000, then you started to, as a district, you had to spend only a certain percentage in this amount. Then you had to spend a certain amount or no more than a certain percentage in a different area. Now they're opening that up. They're eliminating those thresholds. So we could, for example, spend all of the money in well-rounded education or safe and healthy schools or technology. And in the past, we would only have been able to spend 10% in technology or 40% in safe and healthy schools. Now we could use a larger portion of that allocation to support another school resource officer. So I think it makes sense, if we're going to go down that road, that this might be the year for us to consider that. As I shared in the long-term demographic planning meeting, we have there's significant value, and I think there's a significant need with 2,100 students that we're supporting through the school resource officer differently. I did have preliminary conversations with Jamestown Police Department, and they'd be supportive of it, although they couldn't make that happen quickly. There's other expenses that come along with the city, equipment like a vehicle, things like that would, and they would have to get approvals for that as well. But I would like to budget for that to happen in the second half of the semester. I think we could see significant value and benefit from having that second school resource officer that focuses primarily in the elementary, and another one then that focuses primarily on middle school and high school. I think the balance between education, support, building relationships, and then those other law enforcement responsibilities we would see benefit in doing that, and that would be my plan from a budgetary standpoint, is to move forward with adding that SRO when the city of Jamestown can make that happen. So in terms of ESSER claims, later in this agenda, you'll have a budget, revision, thank you. Wow. So a budget revision, but we've talked in the past about trying to claim as much through ESSER as we're able to. In this year, when we've worked through that, we could find an additional $2.4 million that would be eligible through high school staffing. So we would claim that, flow through the general fund. As we have done in the past, to explain that, if there are questions, not just to the board, but to the public, on how we're claiming and where those flow-through dollars go to, we're planning to create another ESSER budget and pathway with that flow chart that provided a lot of detail, but provided just a flow chart as well. to help understand how those corresponding budget revisions will be utilized for our ESSER dollars. I think not quite last, but we later on in this agenda, we'll have a property tax incentive that's a pretty significant increase to an expanding business. In the past, our intention, or in the past, what the board has done is provide support for valuation growth, even if there's a slight delay in how that valuation growth impacts the district. But I think when you are looking at incentivizing growth, that eventually benefits the district as well. So my recommendation is to continue to support those, well, at least this tax incentive request for AgriCover that would be coming before Stutzman County tomorrow. The Teacher Leadership Academy, we are starting on that again. That starts on June 13th and 14th. 13th and the 28th are in Jamestown. And I would just make that, I provided a little bit more detail there, but if in the event that there is any interest in board members, certainly feel willing to stop by and check out some of the TLA, or even if you want to stay for all 8 hours, you certainly could. But I just want to make sure that you are more than welcome to sit in and observe the TLA. I think that it's a great program that's really benefited the district as well. It's going to operate a little bit differently in terms of the Burgum Foundation. They aren't funneling it through the university anymore. They're funneling it through the school district. So the stipends for me as a co-teacher and the stipend for the tuition reimbursement flows through the district. So that's a little bit different. So what I would anticipate doing is putting a personnel hire form in for that. But I just want to reiterate that it isn't general fund dollars. It would be Burgum Foundation dollars that are directly flowing through the district. Same thing that's happened in the past. It just worked through NDSU. UJ prefers not to operate that way, so that would flow through Jamestown Public. But again, it's not general fund expenditures. It's Burgum Foundation development grant dollars. The last item that I had was a request for release of contract. That's also on the board agenda. Mrs. Reed Butts, who is approved for hire on March 21st of this year to teach next year for math, who is also qualified in Spanish. So we were counting on that position to also support foreign language. Has requested a release for hire or release from contract. You can read that written request in the agenda. You really have, in any of these requests, you have three options. The first is to approve the request for release without conditions. You could approve the request for release conditionally upon the hire of a qualified applicant, or you could deny the request and have the expectation that the teacher fulfills that contract with Jamestown Public. My recommendation, because of the difficulty in finding a replacement, and even though it doesn't feel late in a contract year, when they were out in March, it is really late. So my recommendation is to approve the request for release conditionally upon the hire of a qualified applicant. But with that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions for the board? Report. Okay. Moving on. Old business, nothing under old business. F, new business, nothing under activities, nothing under buildings and grounds. Curriculum, assessment, and instruction, nothing under that. Finance. A, approval of textbooks for the 2022-2023 school year. Is there a motion? Motion by Dan. Is there a second? Oh,
I move we postpone action on this until we can have some time to assess whether we're compliant with North Dakota Century Code regarding critical race theory prohibition in the North Dakota Century Code.
okay. I'm assuming you're wanting to table, is what you're saying.
Is it table or postpone?
Could be table.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a second? Second. A second to table? Okay. Postpone or table, I'm not sure what, you want to postpone this agenda item for versus to more information? Okay, so you want to just put it on the next agenda, you're saying? Do we need, then there's a second for that? Any discussion? Go ahead, Gail.
As part of this, could we review who is choosing our textbook and how that happens? I feel it might be very insulting to department chairs who put in a lot of time and are very much aware of those rules. I have some issues with that. I think they do a tremendous job, and I think that might be micromanaging something that they do quite well. I mean, I know our history department, and I know what they would put into those instructors.
Okay.
So I kind of question us questioning them.
Yeah, and for our new board members, we did have Superintendent of Public Instruction Baszler, as well as Cody Mickelson, come to the meeting and talk about how the standards are met and how the standards are developed and so forth. My concern is waiting, just like with anything else, are we going to miss the boat on being able to get them in time? I guess that would be my concern. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Jason?
Is the motion to just postpone the social studies or the whole list?
I'm not sure. I
Sorry.
guess the list. It would
Is this,
be-
is this an all or nothing, I guess, is this an all or nothing vote?
I guess it's, the item is all the textbooks for this year. So, and every year our textbooks are on a rotating basis, as we learned, and these are just the ones that are up for this year. I know in years past, if we've had like, for example, several years ago, I remember we, based on data, we needed to change some of our reading. And so we made a dramatic change. And so then we had a lot more discussion about that. But typically yearly, we update these. Go ahead, Jason.
So are the concerns about Century Code built in as part of our process now in this, or? I mean, do we make a legitimate effort and we've documented that, we've done our due diligence?
Dr. Luck, you can respond, or I can respond to that.
I would say that from what I have reviewed, I do not have concern. That I appreciate the due diligence, but I don't have concern related to that aspect. You know, I would concur with what Gail had said related to the process that's in place. You know, it's generally fairly rigorous, and I would, you know, perhaps recommend that even on the 20th, that we ask if there would be teachers that would be so willing to come in and share in board education the process for curriculum development, what they go through, the questions that they ask, the procedures that they utilize to look at a specific piece of curriculum. And I would reinforce also that these are resources that are utilized by teachers. They might look at a textbook or a chapter in a textbook or a different secondary resource, and they might say, well, I don't want to use that because that doesn't meet state standards, or that doesn't focus on the priority standard that I need to focus on. So I might not use that external resource. I might use this from this textbook. I might go to open source materials and use something different. But our priority is on state standards, and the curriculum, the textbooks, the resources that we use supplement the work of the teacher to do that work. So I personally do not have concern that would be impacted by Century Code on that issue.
So Dr. Luck, even if we approve this today, we could still have ask the teachers to come in and just go through that process next.
I think that would be wise to have a conversation about what that looks like from a teacher standpoint.
Okay.
Whether that could happen on the 20th, or we would have to organize people to come.
It's summer, right.
But I think that would be a wise conversation for the board to be aware of the procedures and the process that they go through.
Okay.
So they know the rigor
Yep.
that goes through
We
with
can-
making that selection.
We went through some of that, but that'd be a good idea, I think.
Yeah, we went through the standards and the
standards.
unit planning.
But not-
the curriculum selection.
Yep. Jason, did you have a follow-up? No? Aaron?
Yeah, I guess just in terms of the process, you know, I think this is part of the process. I don't view this as micromanaging. You know, the board's responsibility is to approve the textbooks. It's part of the process. You know, and this, I think, I looked at some of these, and I do have some concerns as well in here. Opened this up on Friday afternoon, went through 120 pages by Sunday night, and I have some questions. And so I think it's a reasonable request to take a couple of weeks and let's get some concerns addressed, and however we need to do that. But I don't feel comfortable with some of the stuff that's in here. So, and again, I think running it through due diligence
Sure.
is a fair request.
Sure. Okay. Go ahead, Gail.
And yet I also have concerns if we are looking at everything that is taught. I know the teachers, and I know the time that they put in preparing those state standards, and I think I have real concerns that we're applying critical race theory to things that aren't critical race theory. I think that there are things that if we're going to do a deep dive into this, it may be deeper than we realize, and I would really like to hear our teachers and our people who have sat on state curriculum writing, that have sat on state standards writing, that has taken part in textbook selections. As an educator who has done so back when I taught English, I know the procedures that are involved and the amount of hours that are going into it. I mean, I just have real concerns about this direction. And I'd like to hear from our staff on these and how they feel about them.
Dan?
Part of the concern is the public needs to know some of this, how is this going to be perceived by the public? And some of the language that was used when you compare what the definition of the CRT, and I'm not talking CRT capital letters, the legal theory, I'm talking about how it's defined within the Century Code. You're looking at some of the essay and the writing prompts that are part of that, the American YOP piece.
And you're talking about some of the resources.
Some
that
of the
are
resources
included,
that are
yeah.
associated with that.
And they're just resources. I wanna
Again,
make
but
sure
that's
that
not,
they're-
that's not
right.
visible to me. That's not visible to me as a board member. For all I know, and anybody in the public who's looking at this, this is the curriculum. So having that discussion to know, is this just a piece of it, and there's counter arguments are being provided, that's the whole picture that I'm looking for with this delay.
Sure. Okay. Next, anyone else? Any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion. Any other questions? I want to make sure don't want to cut anyone off. Okay, we have a motion and a second and discussion to postpone the approval of the textbooks that were selected. And the budget board basically is what it's for. It's under finance, so we're just approving the dollars. Sally, let's do a roll call.
Melissa Gleason.
And this is just to postpone it, okay.
Diane Hansen? No. Roger, oops, sorry. Heidi Larson?
No,
Jason Rohr?
Yes.
Gail Nelson? No. Dan Tweeten?
Yes.
Aaron Roberts?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 2, 4, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion passes 4-3.
Roger's gone. All right, so we'll put this on the next agenda, and the curriculum the people that chose the curriculum, if you want to just ask the teachers if they're available, but I'm not sure they're available in June 20th, that's my concern, so I'm not sure how much more information we'll have at that point, so that we can see what we can do.
It would help to have a little clarity to me on what the board is asking for with this. I think it would be a challenge to potentially get that group of, to me, board education provides general board education on how is selection of a textbook or resources done, not necessarily asking one particular group of people to come and defend why they have made a decision. So I guess I'm asking what the board is looking for in terms of time to review. Like I said, I did not have concern. I think when you look at critical race theory, that is a higher education theory. It's a theoretical framework that's utilized, and that is, to my knowledge, the intent legislatively, that it is that critical race theory theoretical framework. That's what is prohibited. It isn't a euphemism for diversity. I think we can all agree that those are conversations that need to happen in our K-12 institutions of education. We need to have an understanding of historically what has happened, diversity, what are our responsibilities to be responsive to our culture, other cultures, understanding of different people and how they operate in the those are important aspects of a history class. And so we need to have those conversations. And like I said, from a analysis of the intent of the law and what I feel the law states, there isn't a concern in terms of, is that CRT related? So I'm just looking for a little bit of direction as far as what the board is looking for.
Dan, what are you requesting?
Part of it is the process.
Okay,
Part of it is, since we are responsible, and per our policy, we are legally responsible, and we
Yep.
delegate this out,
yep,
making sure that we understand, is this, what are we getting, what are we buying? And right now, I've seen enough, I have specific instances where it could be interpreted differently. So I'd be looking for basically a statement of compliance or a statement of how this works together to keep us on the right side of the century code.
okay. Aaron, do you have something else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, and I get, in my review, I wasn't necessarily wrapping it around a CRT compliance. So I think there's things other than that, and I can point to specific examples of what I'm looking at.
Okay,
Just extracts from the textbooks that are available online and provide those examples with some commentary to it and we can probably get that information over to you so you
Dr. Luck, okay.
understand what it is that I'm looking at.
okay. So we want process. You have some specific examples. Is there anything else the board would like? Go ahead, Gail.
I'm curious, knowing how AP works, is delaying this going to impact? A lot of kids start that work in the summer because, and I know those AP things work very closely with what they will be tested on. I would really like to hear from that AP teacher and how that might impact the amount of work that goes into prepping for an AP course. I'd be very concerned if they had started doing work around that and then this is upended because of something like this. So I would really, and especially having worked with the AP program a number of years, I really have a pretty good understanding of how that test works and the prep work up to it. So I would be interested too in seeing how they think that impacts that.
Okay, that's not a question I could answer. I don't know what resources were planned to be used at that level. The delay of a few weeks to have some conversation, I would concur, that's a board function. We talk about roles and responsibilities. A board function is the purchase of textbooks. That is a board delineated function, and I think it's an important responsibility. If there are questions, let's have due diligence, and I think one of the things that this board has done consistently is the ability to have conversations that can be difficult but respectful, and ultimately come to whatever conclusion it is. But let's have a conversation about this process, but it absolutely is a board function.
And I think it's good for board members to make sure we understand the process so we can feel comfortable talking to others about the process as well. So, so you have enough information to kind of get started. And Aaron, if you would provide that, I'd appreciate that. And Gail, go ahead.
And I would maybe suggest we don't just have history teachers, that we have other subject matters at hand too, so they can explain the process.
Yeah, I think there's.
So it's
some
not just
different
limited
process here.
to
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think my intention would be to bring a group of teachers that could talk about the process, not so much one department of teachers to talk about and, like I said, defend their selection. I think it's more about the process. And if there are other questions that need to be answered, we're happy to do that. But I'm not sure that would be the most appropriate board education. That could be very challenging.
We'll see who's available June 20th. Draw straws. So, anything else, anyone? Okay. Yep, and if you have any other questions about that process, Dr. Luck, I appreciate you setting that educational opportunity up for us, and we will move on. Approve it of budget revisions there with the subsequent executive summary. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Aaron? Second by Gail? Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on to approval of 2022 to 2023 MOU for e-nursing services. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron, second by Dan. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Review of request for release from contract. And this was discussed in Dr. Luck's report. And Dr. Luck's recommendation was to approve it, if the board so chooses, to approve it conditionally. Is there a motion, and how would you like the motion stated?
I move that we accept it contingent upon.
Okay. So a motion to conditionally approve the contract. Is there a second? Second by Diane. Any discussion on this topic? Aaron, go ahead.
When we interviewed for this position back in March, do you recall how many applicants we had for that?
Not many. One qualified, if memory serves. It's going to be a significant challenge to fill the position in June for a high school math teacher.
As well as Spanish, right?
Yeah, and, you know, there's a few different ways that we can look to address that. But the other alternative, if we don't find a certified person, that's a quality candidate for the position, we would have to look at extended contracts again, which we've done in the past. And there needs to be a willingness to do that. And I think that's a burden for the high school staff to take on that additional prep. So it would certainly be a challenge, but one of the things that we've seen is that we have a lot of people willing to take on those challenges if it's better for kids. So, yeah, I think it's going to be, I think we need to be honest about the fact that that's going to be an extremely hard position to fill. But that's, you know, we have an individual that's coming from another state that has issues that are outlined in that letter of request. And I think, you know, when you're looking at options for the board, it's pretty hard to enforce that contract when they live out of state.
Aaron, did you have a follow-up to that?
Curious on just the practical application of this here, what it means, you know, the conditional versus just a flat-out rejection. Does that give misleading, you know, with recognizing, is there understood that this is going to be a really tough one to fill, and if we don't fill it, they're still going to be expected to be here, and so.
I think what it gives you, what it buys the board is time. You are looking for a position. If things change for that individual and they can make that work, or if there's different family choices that they could make to come and make the move, you're making the statement that a contract is a contract that you signed in March is important to the district. And that's where my recommendation comes for making it contingent upon finding a viable replacement. I think the message is that the contract is important. But ultimately, could the board simply say, we're fine, and, you know, if we don't find another person and we're going to release from contract? You could always do that at a later date as well. But this would send the message, I think, that, you know, we asked for a contract in March, which was signed, and now, you know, we'll release, but it comes contingent upon finding that replacement. Maybe a nuanced difference, but I think it's important.
Any other discussion, questions? Gail, go ahead.
I know it's not the ideal. Have we looked into any people who might be interested in doing the praxis to become highly qualified? And like I said, I know that is definitely not the ideal. Yeah. And just in conjunction with that, do we have any applicants for that middle school math position, or any of those spill over that might go to?
No, we don't have any applicants qualified for that position, but the praxis is something that we look at in these kinds of situations if we can find the right candidate. We would look to that option at the middle school, and we would look to that option at the high school if it was the best option. You know, what that might mean at the middle school, for example, is maybe some shifting around of individuals, which we don't ever like to do, but sometimes it's in the betterment of the district, and what's best for kids is to shift some positions around, we may have to look at that as well. But I think we knew when we brought forward the best candidate for the middle school assistant principal position, that also left a pretty gaping vacancy in math in the middle school as well, and this exacerbates that issue.
Jason?
Yeah, this is a tough one for me because it's a tough situation for everybody, and I might make it sound way simpler than it is, but I do look at the release of contract, and what I'm trying to say is I don't ever like the option of forcing somebody to be here, especially from out of state, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but she is contractually obligated. And this might be my naivety, and I understand it's going to be tough to fill, but I just don't see any positive in releasing a contingent upon us finding a new staff member. So this is really tough for me because I do understand honoring and that we can't just be letting people out of contracts, because that's important too. But considering the location, and I guess one of the questions I would have would be, let's say we pass this contingent upon finding someone, we don't, and she just doesn't show up. What's our recourse there?
Well, typically, you would turn an individual, or the board would have the potential to turn that breach of contract to the Education Standards and Practices Board, and they would be subject to a hearing and revocation of their license. That's different when somebody doesn't hold a license in the state, and I guess I'm not sure in the state in which she currently resides if there's a level of reciprocity to that or not. I really don't know the answer to that. And I think there's a question of, holding multiple contracts as well, holding a contract there and holding a contract here that we're also dealing with.
And it's June 6th, so feeling that type of contract position is going to be challenging. Any other discussion or any other questions? Yep, Dr. Leck?
And just to reiterate, we don't know what could happen. A month from now, situations could change where that individual could honor that contract, and it's, in my mind, it buys you some time.
So we have a motion and a second to conditionally approve a release of contract pending filling the positions. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Under policies and procedures, we have approval of the first reading of FCAC head lice policy and subsequent one, review of head lice treatment verification form FCAC-E1. Number 2, review of steps for treatment and control of head lice FCAC-2. And number 3, review of head lice management FCAC-E3. Is there a motion? Motion by Gal. Is there a second? Yes, is there a second? The board has all kinds of responsibilities. Second by Melissa. Any discussion on this? And I think some of these policies and practices, just even healthcare-wise, have changed over time. So motion and a second. No discussion, no further discussion. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. B, approval of the first reading of GACG, Educational Opportunities Through Sponsoring Entities Policy, and subsequent review of JPS Sponsoring Entity Proposal Application GACG-E. Is there a motion? Oh, yep. So, motion, second? Diane, yep, motion by Dan. Second by Gail. Dr. Leck?
Just a comment. This is a required policy with the law change. And so this shouldn't denote that we are moving to this in next semester or something. We are simply preparing for this law change that's been in place, and doing something like this would require an awful lot of planning and an awful lot of preparation for high school staff. And so I just don't want to give the illusion that this is something that's going to start happening next semester. I think it's a great idea. If we're ready or when we would be ready to do something like this, we certainly could. But this is on the horizon. It's not something that's happening soon. But it is in preparation for law change.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. C, approval to rescind family and medical leave policy DDAA and subsequent approval of the first reading. Oh, should we do that? Yeah, together? We can do that together? Yeah, approval of the first reading of DDAA, Family and Medical Leave Act policy, and subsequent A, approval of DDAA-BR, Family and Medical Leave Act regulations. B, review of Family and Medical Leave Act law, DDAA-E1, and review of Family and Medical Leave Act forms, DDAA-E2. Is there a motion? Motion by Gail, second by Melissa. Any discussion? Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. D, approval of 2022/2023 handbooks. One is the elementary, and the second is the Innovation Academy handbook. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron? Is there a second by Diane? Any discussion? Go ahead, Jason.
Is this motion for both?
Both.
Okay.
Do you have a question on?
Well, the Innovation Academy, was there a place found in the Career Tech Center? Could we just lay that out a little bit? Sorry.
So that is where formerly the adult education, it's utilizing that space, which is a nice large space. And Mr. Heinert and Mr. Gaylor were very welcoming to the former TAG staff, Innovation Academy staff, to make that space available. I think it's a nice location.
Any other discussion? So we have a motion and a second to approve the 2022 to 2023 handbooks for the elementary and the Innovation Academy. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Number 7, tuition. A, approval of a tuition agreement for 11th grade Jamestown student to attend Barnes County North Public Schools for the 2022 to 2023 school year. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron. Second by Melissa. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. B, approval of a tuition agreement for 11th, 8th, 3rd, and 1st grade Jamestown student to attend Medina Public Schools for the 2022 to 2023 school year. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa. Second by Diane. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. C, approval of a tuition agreement for a pre-K Jamestown student to attend Pingree Buchanan Public Schools for the 2022 to 2023 school year. Is there a motion? Motion by Dan. Second by Aaron. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. 8, other. Approval of the 3rd through 5th year demographic, 3 to 5 year demographic plan. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron. Second by Diane. Any discussion on this? All right. There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Okay. Items for future agendas. Melissa.
I would like to just have a review of what the safety protocols are in the schools that we have right now.
Maybe we should connect about what specifically what you're looking for, and maybe we can do some board education or different reports, but yeah, let's just connect on what specifically you're looking for.
Jason.
On Wednesday of this week, I will be attending a teacher shortage summit in Bismarck, and I'd appreciate the chance to report out on that if the board would like to hear.
Sure. Jason, who's holding that? I saw a mailing on that. I was just curious.
School Board Association sent out an email
Yeah, I saw
for
something
volunteers.
about
It's
it.
being put on by the North Dakota Association of Colleges for Teacher Education.
Okay, okay.
So it'll include entities like School Board Association, probably North Dakota United, things
Okay.
like that. So.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I saw an email. I just wasn't sure who was putting that on. And that's next week, Wednesday, you said? This Wednesday, okay, all right. 20th, okay. And then, Dr. Luck, if you could have Mr. Wilson come and talk about spring, just could do the spring report. We have a lot of exciting things happening this spring in athletics and activities both, if you could report on both those. So, anything else? Okay. Aaron?
Did you pick up the buses?
Soon. He's so purchased. They'll be purchased when we go to pick them up. We have a plan to get them later this week, I think.
Very good. We're excited to see those. I just saw some for sale online. And
He was out of the country, so we couldn't get him earlier.
okay. With our money. What, Melissa, did you have something? Oh, okay, I thought you had something. Okay, anything else? Diane?
I wanted to lighten the mood by saying, did you notice the very sharp-looking Boy Scout in the audience today? He's gone now, but
Okay.
he is working towards his Eagle Scout, and I was his troop leader when he was a first-grade Cub Scout.
Very good.
So
Very
I was
good.
very happy to see him in here tonight.
Yes. Very good. And we welcome him tonight.
Yeah, it's
and
great
other
to see
audience members.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Anything else for the board? Feels a little strange getting done at 6:15, Dr. Luck. Your reports were too fast. So, oh, we're not done yet. Okay, we have a few things left. A few things left to announce, but we're nearing the end. So if there's any other items, so make sure you contact Dr. Luck. And if also just a reminder to board members too, if you have some questions about the agenda and those types of things, make sure that you, Dr. Luck is always available to reach out to you and get you additional information that you might be needing or questions you might be having. Meetings to be scheduled. We have a health insurance meeting on Monday, June 13th, and this is going to be at noon, since we're now in summer hours, in the district office conference room. B, school board meeting on Monday, June 20th, 2022 at 5:15 in the Thompson Community Room at the middle school. Under your monthly superintendent evaluation, it's community relations and operations and resource management. Make sure you complete that. There being no further, oh, yep, Aaron.
So we did call the ad hoc committee for the school lunch review.
Oh, yes.
We haven't met yet on that. I was wondering,
Okay.
should we get something organized on that, just scheduled? And
Okay.
I don't know, does that go through you or is it?
Yep, Amy.
You do that?
Amy,
Okay.
yeah, it's good. Sounds good. Yep, good reminder.
Yep, thank you.
Anything else before we adjourn the meeting tonight? Okay. There being no further business before the board, the meeting is adjourned.